Good afternoon. Welcome to our afternoon session. We'd just like to kick off the session I want to welcome Dr. Jennifer Gitahi and Thomas Joseph from the Kenya School of Law. Dr. Jennifer Gitahi is one of the lecturers at the Strathmore Law School.
Yes, good afternoon. We would just like to give a few ideas regarding tomorrow's panel session 3, which we shall be co-moderating. Just speaking a bit from the experience that we've had this morning with the panel session, we have a few ideas that we think could help us to prepare better. It's a very interesting panel session, especially for the students who are our main guests in this summit, because as you can see, it's on the last page of the program. The theme we're going to be looking at is a very broad theme. It regards opportunities in the sector that are available to students. We happen to have a very, very powerful panel of 12 members, hoping that they will all be available tomorrow. We are very optimistic that they'll be here. Now, what we would like to do is have the panel address the questions and concerns that you have. So what we propose is that they will introduce themselves, and then we would like to have them address your concerns. There are many ways of doing it, but we propose a specific modality, which Thomas Joseph is going to explain to you now. Very simple, but the idea behind it is to get them to address what you have at heart. Karibu.
All right, thank you. So panel session 3, opportunities in the sector available for students. So you'll realize it's themed. It has academia, practice, training, and partnerships. So based on what you have on that page, you can have questions. You can just take a piece of paper and prepare questions beforehand. And at the end of today's session, you're going to pass me those papers so that we can have them prepared beforehand, so that we can have an engaging session tomorrow. So I'll be seated over here. You can just reach out to me before you leave for the students that are here from every university present. So that would help us to moderate this session quite well. So I think that's it.
Attending virtually, and send them on chat.
All right, and those that are attending virtually, you could also put them on the chat section, and then we'll address them. I will address them tomorrow. Okay. That's a good question. We're going to also have a spontaneous session for that. So don't worry.
So we'll open it out, and then we have 2 hours.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we shall just move on to our next panel discussion, which shall be on the vital considerations in the child justice sector. This shall be moderated by Ms. Anita Wambui, who is a former alumnus of the Strathmore Law School. She did her Bachelor in Law degree with us. She used to work for the Strathmore Institute of Family Studies and Ethics, where she was focused on research and funding. Her interests include children and the law, sexual and gender-based violence, and the role of technology in shaping contemporary families. Can we please give a round of applause for our next moderator? Hi, everyone. I hope you've had a wonderful lunch and you feel re-energized for one of the last sessions. So for this session, taking time into consideration, this session is limited to 45 minutes. It's going to be a panel discussion. So I'd like to welcome the following people. From the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, I'd like to welcome Mr. Elijah, who is going to replace Veronica Mwangi. From the African Committee of Experts on Rights and Welfare of the Child, I'd like to welcome Mr. Robert Doya Nanima, who will be joining us virtually. And from the Probation and Aftercare Service, Services, I'd like to welcome Ms. Florence Mweni. Okay. And from the HIV/AIDS Tribunal, I'd like to welcome Ms. Helen Namisi to the front. Can we give them a round of applause as they come? Maybe you could take a seat that already has a microphone. Helen Namisi. Okay, while we wait for Helen, maybe Florence Mweni and Elijah could introduce themselves and tell us what they do, where they are from, and we can start from there.
Thank you very much. Good evening, distinguished colleagues, students, and participants at large. My name is Elijah Kandiero Tok. I come from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights within the Reforms and Accountability Division under the Directorate of Research, Outreach, and Advocacy. What we do is we work around child justice, especially on access to justice, and also some work around intersex persons, and to ensure that we do promote and protect the rights of the child within the Kenyan territory. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. How was lunch? Ilikuwa poa. My name is Florence Mweni. I am a probation officer. I'm an assistant director of probation at probation headquarters, and there I am responsible for the rehabilitation of special needs offenders, which includes children.
Okay, thank you. Can we give them a round of applause? Maybe now we can have Mr. Robert Doyer online to introduce himself. Not available at the moment. He'll introduce himself when he manages to join. So without further ado, I'd like this to be a very interactive session. So if you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to ask. Meanwhile, the panelists can go into the meat of what they do regarding child justice and and the vital considerations they have to take when dealing with children in the child justice sector. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. As I had mentioned, that I work for the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, and we are a creation of the Article 59 of our Constitution, which with a broad mandate to protect, monitor, and also promote human rights in Kenya. In addition to some of the roles that we do have is that we are the national human rights institution that represents our country, that is the NHRI. And under the Paris principles that requires all United Nations countries to have a human rights institution within their jurisdictions, then KNCHR falls within that mandate of the NHRI. We do have obtained an A status to ensure, that means that we have met all the required components to establish a national human rights institution as a country. And therefore, some of the benefits that come with it is that we do have the affiliate status within the African Commission on the Welfare on the Rights of the Child. And also before the Human Rights Committee, we do also enjoy that status such that we do also have the opportunity to speak to issues about human rights within the country at that level, especially as we in next, while the AG goes to make presentations, we do also are given an opportunity. Now, in terms of our mandates, we are also constituted by the KNCHR Act of 2011, and some of the functions and powers are stipulated in Section 8, some which include conducting investigations, establishing programming, providing redress for, and also conducting, raising awareness on the promotion and protection of the rights of Kenyans. And specifically to this would be the rights of the child. And in addition to that, we've also obtained other functions within the Prevention Against Torture Act, where we are the primary body mandated to conduct investigations and also provide reports to both the National Assembly and the Senate on the protection of this right, on the freedom against torture. In addition to this, also, we sit in various boards. We sit in the board of the ODPP, we sit in the board of the National Legal Aid Services, and also the Corona Services. These are acts that are yet to, some of the acts such as the Coronas is yet to be operationalized, and therefore we still are pushing for the advocacy. Now to children, on specific to children, we also host the committee on the implementation of intersex persons' rights. It's known as IPIC, and we do host the secretariat and to ensure that intersex persons realize their rights, most of whom, as our data reveals, are children. And so what we do, apart from supporting the public and private actors towards the promotion and respect of human rights in Kenya, we do also provide, we do play a watchdog role such that when we have the impetus also to sue the government, yet we are also part of the state. So that watchdog role has at times placed us on a collision course between us and other government agencies, because we would demand for accountability towards the realization of children's rights. So through our systems, we do receive complaints on various violations on children, especially on children's rights. And we do some of the remedial actions that we do take, apart from providing legal aid. We do also take up public interest litigation, especially when it is a systemic issue that affects the broad spectrum of our population. Then we would go to court on this. We do also provide, aside from that, we do extensive research on systemic human rights issues that affect our population and work towards the promotion and protection of human rights. We do also work with various government agencies and look at this, where there are structural issues or there are systemic issues. We would try and see how to institute reforms within these institutions, and also conduct public trainings on the promotion of the rights of the child. Recently, our country just concluded the UPR process, that is the Universal Periodic Review. And I think this would be a good forum just to let let us know some of the commitments and the concluding observations that were made specific to our country and that our government has agreed to work towards the realization. For instance, our government has committed to utilize the existing tools that have been developed by agencies working around human rights, especially on the rights of the child. As specific are the UNODC, UNICEF, and NGOs that require technical assistance on juvenile justice. For instance, again, our state has committed that they will adopt a holistic and preventive approach towards addressing the problem of children in conflict with the law and the underlying social factors. Another is that we have also committed towards the enactment of the National Legal Aid Act and operationalize it so as to provide free legal services for children who are in conflict with the law. Another is to, of course, to continue the consistent application of the best interest of the child principle in all incidences that involve children who are in conflict with the law, and also to expedite court proceedings that concern children who are in conflict with the law, and also to provide other alternatives such as the diversion programs and ensure that non-custodial sentences are used for children who are in conflict with the law as much as possible. And if where detention is necessary, the children must be detained in separate facilities than that of adults. These are these are just an example. I could mention others such as the provision of a conducive rehabilitation that includes access to psychosocial support, education, and health facilities of the child. So these are some of the actual commitments that when our state was before the Human Rights Committee, made commitments that we will work towards this. And so as an agency, part of our advocacy is to work with the different state agencies to ensure that these are not just commitments that are made for the sake of making, but they are actually realized before the next periodic review. As from some of our work that we've done before is we have participated in developing also jurisprudence within our country, especially relating to children who are of intersex in nature. We do know of the popular case Baby A that involved an intersex child, and the AG from that determination was directed to come up with a framework to establish policy and guidelines towards the recognition of intersex persons in Kenya. And I think we are the first country in Africa to have intersex persons recognized within our national census. So that is something that we have made progress as a country, and we are a place where many countries have come to see and to borrow from us. Also in others, we dealt with matters related to the surrogacy procedures that are conducted within our medical field, where we made sure that when a mother seeks surrogacy, that they can be able to obtain their children and not their children separated from them because of the lack of a specific guideline or a framework to sustain this. And therefore, from such groundbreaking determinations from our court, we've been able to ensure that some frameworks have been established so as to help mothers who want to use IVF as a form of realizing their reproductive rights are able to do so, and that the children who are born out of surrogacy have their rights protected. Also, you'll realize that within our juvenile justice system,
Mr. Elijah, could you kindly wrap up, please?
Yes, thank you very much. You will realize that at times the vulnerability that children have within the juvenile justice sector are based on because of their age, have found themselves in instances where they are used as a form to settle scores within the family unit. And we've been also helping persons who've been charged wrongfully within our criminal justice system. For instance, when a mother or a relative colludes with a child so as to either criminalize either a spouse or a relative, we've been able to come into these matters and seek the actual proper determination of this and have these cases reviewed. There's a popular case last year about a father who had been wrongfully charged with defilement of defiling the daughter, and we were able to intervene when later on the child had come of age and came to realize that she actually had contributed towards the criminalization and also the subjecting of her own father into prison because of the wishes of her mother. In other instances, we closely work under the umbrella of the NCAJ that coordinates children actors. We've closely worked with the Court Users Committee to bring around issues that deal with sexual and gender-based violence that especially touch on girls and boys, to try and work towards towards policy, and also not only policy, but working towards ways that have a practical approach towards addressing these issues. Also, matters related to female genital mutilation, we've worked closely with other civil society organizations to ensure that FGM is eradicated in places that are highly prevalent in order to protect the child. I think I can stop there for now, but I wish we were afforded more time to speak on these issues. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry that I had to cut you off. Very wonderful insight, especially on the recognition of the intersex persons. I'm informed that we are joined by the chair of the HIV/AIDS Tribunal, Ms. Helena Missy, who is here to introduce herself, and also by Robert Doya, who's joined us online from the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So let's have them introduce themselves, then we'll circle back to Ms. Mweni.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. I'm Robert Nanima. I'm a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and I also serve as a special rapporteur for children affected by armed conflict.
Wow, your one sentence was very powerful. Yes, and then Mr. Robert Doya.
Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon, I'm Robert Nanima. I'm a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and I also serve as a special rapporteur for children affected by armed conflict. I also serve as a lecturer at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town. It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
I hear you, Robert.
Good afternoon once again. I'm Robert Nanima. I'm a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and I also serve as the Special Rapporteur for Children Affected by Armed Conflict. I also serve as a senior lecturer at the University of the Western Cape in Cape Town. It's an honor to be here, and I look forward to having these conversations with you. Thank you.
Special needs, children with special needs in the justice system. We have an operational definition of who are children with special needs in the child justice system. These are children with mental health problems or mental health disorders, and the disorders are many. But some of the most common include behavioral problems, things like conduct disorder. These are children who violate rules of society. They have some certain kind of a strong willingness, opposition to authority. So in school, you know, they have problems adjusting in school, they drop out. So some have trauma, some have things like depression. So you have children in the law, in contact with the law for things like attempted suicide, which unfortunately is still a crime in this country. So I won't go into the list of those, but there is also children with developmental disabilities. They are born with them, or maybe they developed them after being born. And, you know, as you heard from this morning, there's really a thin line between protection and children in need of care and protection and children in conflict with the law. So probably because of some of those developmental disabilities, like maybe a child has that, you know, what Judge Mazeka was talking about, dyslexia. So they drop out of school because it's difficult. Schools are supposed to be for performance. And then maybe they go to the streets and nobody notices that. And then, you know, they get into contact with the law. We have, if you look at, is it section 118 of the Children's Act, I think? All that list are special needs. Basically, there is no child in the justice system that we can say this one has no special needs. So the distinction isn't that they must have a physical disability for them to be considered as a child with special needs. Being a child in and of itself is a special needs. The ability to navigate a very complicated justice system, as we saw from the personal experience, can actually make a child already vulnerable. So we have that, but like I'm saying, we have sex offenders, we have intersex children, like we just had, we have within the justice system again, because they require us as players in the justice system to put in extra efforts and resources and time and techniques and you know, assessments and all those kinds of things in order to address those needs. You will realize when you start practicing that one case of just one child can take you months. And I think that could be the reason why sometimes it's so hard to get a lawyer to do pro bono for children, because you know you can come across a case, you can get a file of a child who is just charged with stealing a phone. But when you start working with that child, you realize they are an orphan, they have been sexually abused, there is domestic violence at home, probably they have a disability. So, you know, there's all this array of things that need to be addressed. And that's why we classify children as having special needs. Now we have programs, things that we do as a justice system in order to address their needs. Like in probation, for example, where I work, we do assessments and screening to identify what are some of their needs. And one of our most important screening tool is the probation officer's reports. The kind of questions that probation officers ask are not the kind of questions that lawyers ask, for example. We are interested in not what you did, but how come you are the way you are? Is it family? Is it environment? Is it biological? Is it genetic? Is it peer pressure? What are the issues that we need to address? And I think my colleagues from this year's also Children's Department address the same things. So once we screen, we develop an individualized treatment plan for every child. And this individualized treatment or care plan, in the case of a child in need of care and protection, is full of things we call case management. So if this child is being referred to a specialist to address their specific special need, that is drawn by the case officer, whether that's a children officer, it's a prison officer, because my presentation is just, touching on the whole justice system, or whether that's a probation officer. So that plan addresses who are the players who are going to address the various needs of this child. So in case management, we have a lot of multidisciplinary, multi-agency working, because there's no one agency that can address the needs of that child. The school, Ministry of Education needs to be there to provide education. Like I'm saying, some just need vocational rehabilitation. Others need the specialists of those psychologists. Others need speech therapists. Others need, extradition. Others need restorative justice for them to be reconciled. So like we were taught by the ODPP that they do diversion. So when they apply for diversion, we implement the diversionary options. So when you're dealing with children with special needs, there's a lot of multi-agency work. I'll just mention the challenges. One, I've mentioned the multi-agency working, which is a strength, but it's also a challenge. Because for multi-agency to work, there needs that efficient and coordinated efforts of each agency. So sometimes it can be a challenge, and that's how children fall through the net. Training of justice agents. I don't know whether you guys in law school, anybody has come to talk to you about children with special needs, how to identify and detect a child who has special needs. The other day I was in a police station just talking to children, and I was talking to this child, and within the first 2 minutes, because my background is in clinical psychology, I could tell this child has a speech problem. I was imagining this child being interviewed maybe by another justice professional. You have 10 other children waiting, but this one takes like 3 minutes to answer one question. Sometimes we lack that knowledge. We might think that the child is not speaking or the child is refusing to speak, but to produce those words to respond to our question can be a challenge. So lack of training, lack of specialization. We focus so much on our primary roles, and some of us are law enforcement people. So there's no time to sit and ask a child, how come you are the way you are? What kind of traumas did you experience? What kind of difficulties as you're growing up? How about your family? How come you are the way you are like this? That there is no time sometimes to address those kinds of things. Then there is lack of proper rehabilitation programs that address those specific needs. We have a lot of children with drug abuse problems. I think for us, like in probation, the majority of our child clients are there for substance use addiction, which is very serious. They will commit offenses that are sometimes not actually even, it's not the substance abuse that is the offense, but the underlying issues that the behaviors they engage in as they try to deal with their substance use. But then the programs are one of the challenges. And then of course, lack of professionals within the system like we have had. So like in probation, what we do is when we are recruiting, we try to recruit students from universities, because that's the entry point, a degree in psychology, social work, criminology. Sometimes we'll get a lawyer here and there, like my colleague was here before me. In order to be able to have different kinds of resources within our probation officer population. So basically, those are some of the issues. I think I'll stop there and I will be able to respond to questions.
Thank you so much. It is not what you did, it is what makes you who you are. That's a very important question I've learned. Okay, going forward to Ms. Helena Misi. Another 7 minutes, 5 if possible.
I'll try.
Thank you.
So first of all, I want to thank all of you and congratulate all of you because the seed has been planted. It's now up to you to water it, fertilize it, and ensure that in a few years, we will be referring to you as our colleagues. So I will refer to you as my future colleagues because I'm an advocate. I know that you will go forward with this seed. So let's put this discussion in context. I want you to take out your pens and piece of paper or wherever you're writing. Write down these figures I'm going to tell you. So in the year 2020, we had 2.8 million children living with HIV, 2.8 million. In the world, 9 out of 10 of those are in sub-Saharan Africa. That's 90%. I know we are lawyers, we don't do mathematics, but just try to calculate. In the year 2017, according to the national statistics, 8,000 children below the age of 14 were new infections, HIV. New infections, not the existing ones, new infections. And then about over 100,000 were persons between the age of 15 and 24, new infections. In the year 2010, we had 998,000 orphans of AIDS. This number went down to 581,000 in 2017. So if I was to ask you today, do you see the impact of HIV on our children? Can you feel it in those figures? It is serious. And so when we are talking about our children, yes, we have said there's a lot of legislation. In fact, if you think of any individual in this country who has a lot of legislation around them, it's a child, isn't it? You've seen that the whole day, the whole morning, everybody has been saying that. But at the same time, you had the same message that they are still the most vulnerable. Now add in HIV. And here when we're talking about HIV, we're talking about either a child is infected or affected. So either the child is living with HIV, and this could be because they were born with it, or they were infected in one way or another, okay? Or is affected by virtue of their parents being positive, or by virtue of being orphans of HIV/AIDS. So if we were to calculate the ones who are infected, and then talk about the general population that is infected, how many children are affected? Quite a number, isn't it? So this is a clarion call to all of you as future lawyers, advocates, that there's so much that we can do for these children, a lot, in terms of educating them of their rights. Because one thing that we have discovered in our work is that a lot of the time, these children between 0 to 18 rarely even know that they are positive, because their parents don't tell them for one reason or another. Either they do not want to burden their children with the shame or the stigma associated. You go to a school, you find some children are sitting in a corner. They are being segregated, secluded. Why? Because they are positive. So they can't play with other children, okay? There's a lot of misinformation out there about how HIV is transmitted. And so even the teachers themselves will be part of the problem. Their own colleagues, when they hear, their own friends, their peers, that so-and-so is positive, because at home they had kuna huyu mdudu, right? They decide that that child should not be, you should not go near that child, we should not play with that child. So you find that, as you heard in the morning, when one right is violated, there is a multiple effect. All the other rights are violated. We discriminate against this child. Then this child suffers because of right to education, right to information, privacy, right? Right to life, for example, to live a meaningful and dignified life. So as future advocates, And this is something you can even do right now. We need to inform the public. We need to inform these children of their rights. I'm not saying that we should now go and tell them that they are positive. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is we need to inform everyone of the rights that they have. And more importantly, the children. Because many times, as I said, you have this child who is on ARVs from birth, will go through life on ARVs, and what are they told by their parents? You know, you have a chest problem, so you just take those drugs. That's what they're told. Yeah? If you don't take those drugs, you'll start coughing. That's what they're told. They're not actually told the reason why they are actually on ARVs. They are not told. And that is because as a society, we still have a lot of stigma towards people and children living with HIV. A lot of stigma. And this is something we have to address as advocates, as lawyers, as a society. Because if we are saying we want to get to a point where we do not have new infections or AIDS-related deaths in our society, then we have to address stigma. Without addressing stigma, you will not have people testing, you will not have people taking their ARVs, and we have made tremendous advancements in medicine to the extent that a person who is taking ARVs properly will not even be able to transmit that disease to you. Isn't it? I'm sure we are aware of that. If you're not, then I'm telling you today, it is possible. A person who is taking their medication properly will get to a point where they are not able to transmit the disease anymore. And that's the point where we need to be getting to. And we need to protect our children. So what is the tribunal doing? We are actively engaging in creating awareness to the parents, first of all, and in whatever forums to the children, and reaching out to people like you, lawyers, who have the seed planted in them, in the interests of the children, okay, to help us. Because there's this opportunity through your legal clinics to be able to reach out to the community, to the grassroots. Most of these violations we have found actually occur in the plots. Unajua kule kama ploti, that is where these violations occur, okay? We cannot say that they occur perhaps, in the leafy suburbs of Nairobi. No, it is actually in those grassroots areas, because many people don't even know their basic rights.
Ms. Helen?
Yes.
I need to ask you to wrap up a little.
I have 2 more minutes. Okay.
If you insist.
Research. Research is also an area that you can look into, and review of the various statutes so that they are aligned to the Constitution and also in tandem with society, because we find that a lot of them are actually behind society, lagging behind society. Now, to wind up and leave you with this thought, in law, you are taught that a child has no right to give consent, right? They cannot consent, right? And then you have that infamous case in Malindi where they said you can have a mature minor. Yeah? And in the HIV and AIDS Prevention and Control Act, we actually say that a mature minor, well, they are not actually called that, but a minor who can be assessed to be one to give consent, can give consent to the test. For example, if they themselves are parents, if that child is a parent, if that child is expectant, or if that child is engaged in a behavior that puts the child at risk. That's a thought for you. Think about it. Do we need to review some other acts to be in line with society? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And I hope all future advocates here will accept the clarion call to be the informants of children on their rights. So going forward, we'll have Mr. Nanima virtually as our last panelist.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me this time. I am Robert Nanima. I'm based at the University of the Western Cape as a senior lecturer. And I also serve as a member of the African Committee of Experts on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. I also serve as the special rapporteur for children affected by armed conflict, and it's an honor to be here. Could I just get an indication whether I'm being heard? I was told I was not being heard before, and I have a PowerPoint presentation that I would want to share. But from this side, I cannot share because I'm disabled from screen sharing. Oh, thank you that you can hear me. Can I be allowed to share my screen? Thank you. Okay, thank you very much once again, and sorry for that delay. It's an honor to join you remotely. It's always an honor to work with Strathmore. I've worked with the law school on research projects, and it's an honor to join you again. So I'm speaking from a perspective, from a regional perspective of the African Committee as an African Union body that deals with the promotion and protection of the rights of the child. And I'm looking at vital considerations concerning vulnerabilities of the child in the system, but I'm looking at a regional perspective. I'm aware of the expectations that you have as students and other members here. I'll not go through them, but I hope that there'll be an awareness that will be raised concerning the child justice system at the African region level, and that with this we shall be able to discuss challenges facing children. Now, I'm not looking at only children who have special needs, but I'm looking at vulnerabilities in a bigger context. And in that context, I'll also highlight the position of the African Charter on the rights and welfare of the child in terms of the normative guidance it gives, and the position of the African Committee of Experts on the rights and welfare of the child in terms of the jurisprudential guidance that it gives that could help us from a regional perspective to a national perspective to our communities where we work on a daily basis. I'm happy to engage with persons who are working with probation office, who are working on issues of community service, DPP. I myself, having been a state attorney some time back, it's an honor to engage with you in this area. So this is my overview. I'm going to talk to the different, I'm going to give an overview on vulnerabilities just to latch on what aspect I'm speaking about. Then I'll talk about the different environments and latch on a particular one. Then I'll speak about the place of the African Charter and the African Committee of Experts. And as stakeholders, what's the way forward? There's a lot of jurisprudence, a lot of law, normative guidance on issues of children, but I will not go into the details. But if you look at these slides, I'll share this with the hosts. You'll discover that when you look at all these laws, they'll speak to specific vulnerabilities of children. What is interesting is that all children are already vulnerable by virtue of the fact that they are children. So any other challenge that they face, let it be from the physical spaces, let it be in the social spaces, let it be economic by virtue of their parents or caregivers not being in a position to look after them, the concepts of vulnerabilities come up and they're extremely wide. And using a contextual approach that narrows it down to given parameters might be quite instructive. So I'm not just looking at physical vulnerability in terms of remoteness of settlements where they stay, in terms of population density. I'm not taking the social vulnerabilities aspect in terms of inability to withstand some challenges in society, or the economic or the environmental, but I'm trying to contextualize it from the perspective of children as part of the human race, where we have children on one hand and adults on another. So when you talk about vulnerabilities in that context, when you're talking about humans, there are different issues that come up. Is it in terms of sex? Is it in terms of age? Is it in terms of other status? If it's in terms of age, then issues such as who is a minor, who is a child, who is an adult comes up. Then in the context of minors, we also discover that they are not a homogeneous lot. Are they toddlers? Are they infants? Are they teens? Are they adolescents? Then issues such as sexual and reproductive health come up. Then that means that if we are going to look at the context of vulnerabilities, there are very many subjective challenges that we face when we try to contextualize them. For instance, if you're looking at children with special needs, they are in various environments, not only in an environment where there is peace, not only in an environment where there is war, but in various environments. So I think it's good to look at the environments, appreciate the environments that children are in, and then we take on the concept of vulnerabilities. This does not, this notwithstanding the fact that they are children with special needs in our system. They're children with special needs in our care. But let us look at it from a holistic perspective, from an international to a regional to a national specific perspective. Some of the challenges that children have, for instance, I'll give an example of Kenya, an example of Uganda. There are issues of prostitution, there are issues of trafficking, there are issues of pornography. There are children who are in need of alternative care. There are children who are in areas of forced labor. There are children who are apparently married off because of early marriages. There are children who are subjected to harmful practices. There are children who are affected by armed conflict. There are children who are in conflict with the law. All those are different vulnerabilities. But when you look at the concept and the context, you discover that all these vulnerabilities have one aspect in common. There is an environment that this child is tagged to. This environment, regardless of what the environment is, these children need access to justice. These children need a justice system that embraces them. These children need, if they are in special needs, they need, their position has to be appreciated regardless of the environment they are in. So it's because of this that I do not look at children with special needs per se only, but I look at them in a grander scheme of things. I take us down a journey where we look at children who are affected by armed conflict. But before I speak about these children, I would like to just latch on something, that there are different environments that our children find themselves in, and we know these environments. They could be areas of relative peace. There is no war, there is no strife, there is no tension. You wake up every morning, you go to school. The challenges are not so much like those the child who is affected by armed conflict, who is affected by tension and strife. That's another environment. There's an environment where we see children as refugees, where they are moving from areas where there's been armed conflict to areas where they are trying to seek solace, or where they are internally displaced persons. If we are looking at the child who is a special needs child, I think we should also take the conversation to that child who is affected by armed conflict, but out of an area of armed conflict, but is a special needs child. For instance, if this child is in Dadaab, if this child is in Kakuma, how do we help this child if this child has special needs? At the end of the day, he also needs a safe environment to thrive, to develop holistically. He also needs to go to school. He needs the right to health. So the concept of special needs, I think it's also instructive to take the conversation from the normal position to a position where there are these other children. At times, they look at themselves as the others because at times they're refugees, they're internally displaced, but they're also children with special needs. So that is where we take our conversation. So on the basis of this appreciation of these environments, the question is now, what does the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child bring to the table? How can it help our governments? How does it help the end user? In addition, the reasons that led to its adoption were because of various factors. For instance, there was some kind of political exclusion of African states when they were drafting the CRC, the Charter on the Rights of the Child. There were some legal omissions in the CRC. The situation of children in apartheid was not dealt with, and there's some factors that disadvantage the African child. Those lived realities that we know about that were not sufficiently considered. In addition, there are some practices that remain prevalent in our society, like FGM. that were not dealt with. There's an issue of responsibilities and duties of the child in the African Charter. And it also talks about the role of the extended family in the upbringing of the child. So because of that history, the Charter has added value that it brings to the table to protect the child first from the position that he or she is a child who is already vulnerable. Sorry, I missed that, but I guess it means I have very few minutes to go. But the added value is there is the definition of a child, the straight 18-year position. A child is 18 years and not less than that, regardless of what the national laws provide for. Secondly, it protects children from being taken up into from being used as child soldiers. From being used as child soldiers, it talks about protection of child refugees. It joins it joins civil and political rights as well as social and economic rights. There is nothing like progressive realization. It talks basically about governments taking all measures are necessary to ensure that the rights of the child are promoted and protected. And it also talks about the duty of the child. It also uses the child rights-based principle that engages non-discrimination, the best interests of the child, life, survival, and development, participation of the child. So we see the child as a direct beneficiary, not simply as an extension of his parents. It has the general mandate to promote, protect, interpret, and monitor the rights of the child. There are also thematic mandates like promotion of the child who are affected by armed conflict, promotion of children who are affected by some cultural practices. And it also draws on inspiration from other points of law, from the UN, from the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. And I think that is very instructive. So on the basis of the added value that the Charter brings on board, and on the basis of the expansive role that the committee can use in monitoring the promotion and protection of the rights of the child, there is a lot that we can do as stakeholders, whether you are a student, whether you are working with government, whether you're working with CSOs, national human rights institutions, individuals. There is a lot that you can do towards the promotion and protection of the rights of the child. I believe if we use added value of the Charter and inculcate it into our policies, inculcate it into our curricula, inculcate it into things that we do towards the promotion of the rights of the child, I think that would speak volumes to promotion of the rights of the child, not only that child who has special needs, but all children. I'm going to finish in 2 minutes. Thank you very much. By way forward, there are many ways we can engage with the committee. For instance, through the promotional mandate, ratification and domestication. That has been done. 50 countries have ratified. Child monitoring, consideration of reports. When Kenya brings its report, CSOs should be able to come forward and also add value to the report that Kenya has given. There are other protection measures, such as the complaints mechanism, where you engage the committee and bring cases to the committee, but after you have engaged, you've exhausted local remedies. Interpretation mandate in terms of using general comments, days of general discussion, that's very instructive. And this being almost my last slide, you can also use the experts themselves. This is a list of the 11 experts of the African Committee. It shows the countries that they are in charge of. For instance, for Kenya, Honorable Ava Gava from Nigeria is the country rapporteur for Kenya. So when you have a matter that deals with children and you want to get her expertise, you can drop her an email, and believe me, I believe she'll be more than willing to engage with you. I believe that in using a bottom-down approach where we try to engage the added value of the Charter to our laws, to our policies, will help us to ensure that we have a mode of fostering an Africa fit for children, such that at the end of the day, we have children fit for Africa. Thank you so much for listening to me, and I'll be willing to take some questions later.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nanima. A final round of applause for all our panelists. So now I'll hand over the microphone to Nicole, who will take us through the Q&A session. This is a Q&A for everyone all the panelists who've spoken, even before lunch. So all the questions you had, this is your time.
Okay, so I can see that there are a few hands in person. So I think we can go with her question first. Just kindly stand up, say your name and what institution you're from before you ask your question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, or is it evening? My name is Grace Zawadi Waliuli. I am a fourth year student, African Nazarene University. So I had two questions. The first, I can see we have a representative from the Human Rights Commission. And my question is on whether you have been able as a commission to consider schools as ripe ground for child's rights abuses. I think it is something that needs to be explored. On occasion, we will hear in the news about a teacher who made a very gross violation of human rights, but most students here, I'm certain, attended public high schools and can attest that there are human rights violations that are going on in schools, but that are cloaked because of the nobility that we give to teachers and the fact that parents find it to be a touchy subject, because if you address it too aggressively, then your child will be, taken up as the problem child with the problem parent. So that was an issue that I thought would be interesting for the commission to explore. And then recognizing that we have the Honorable Lady Justice present, I had a question about the very delicate balance that has to be exercised. I think we were allowed to ask questions even from previous sessions. There's a very delicate balance that must be played in a courtroom where a child is an accused person, because whereas we want to wish that most children are the ideal child, but that is not the case sometimes. Sometimes children commit very gross crimes, very grim acts against society. So my question is, how is the judiciary able to balance their responsibility to deliver justice to the society so that the society feels reparated? For example, in a case where a child decided to burn down a dorm, probably killed someone in the process, what has been described as the criminal gene. Some children just have a criminal tendency. So how do you balance that with the fact that they are a child and trying to avoid recidivism, which could result from a very strict punishment, yet the punishment may be necessary because of the crime that was committed? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. I shall ask one of the questions that was asked online. This was also asked to the Human Rights Commission. It was asked, why was the Kenya Human Rights Commission silent to the plight of children who fall victim to banditry in the North Rift? So I think with those three questions, I think we can proceed. So the panelists may answer the question in whatever order that they see fit.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments and also your questions. They actually enrich our discussion. First, about children's rights within the context of schools. As an institution, we've taken note that teachers are public officers. As long as you're within the umbrella of the Teacher Service Commission, you are a public officer. And once you institute punishment, either to extract information or to use it in whatever means, then you will fit the ingredients of the offense of committing an act of torture within the context of the Prevention of Torture Act. And therefore, it is very critical that our teachers exercise discretion, especially when they are guiding students. And I think there are various also guidelines within our country that have, for instance, banned corporal punishment or collective punishment of students within our education system. That being said, we as an institution have taken steps to ensure that within our curriculum with our country, there is the component of human rights that is infused. So if your child today is especially going through the CBC program, there is a component where the children today are taught about their rights. And not only that, is that we are infusing guidelines and working closely with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development to ensure that not only children are aware of their rights, but they should be able to know what steps they can do whenever they feel that their rights are violated. And it is we are an open agency and have an open door policy that any child who feels that their rights is either threatened or violated should feel free to approach us, and we will work with them to try and see that their rights are protected and promoted. That I can say, and I would completely welcome that comment. In terms of also, I had a question about why we were silent when children were violated in the North Rift. I do believe that the context here was the restfulness and also the restiveness and the issues that were surrounding security around the North Rift that is tied to either cattle rustling and other violations. We do have, as an institution, way as early as 2016, have come up with a substantive report known as Mending the Rift. This has looked at the question of the right to security of the person of the communities that are surrounding that area. And we made substantive recommendations. We actually conducted a public inquiry into this. And so whenever we see the deployment of security agencies in some of these areas that have problems related to cattle rustling, we've put up strong recommendations for the state to take up. And for us, when we saw violations, it was not about now going to the ground, but going back to the various agencies and ask them why they have or have not implemented the recommendations that we have done. We had made specifically to them towards the realization of this. And you will realize that in some of the cases, you would find children are used to carry guns and to attack other security agencies, knowing their vulnerability, that they would either the agencies would be more lenient towards them and therefore use them as a form of ambush or surprise. And this, we've worked closely with community elders to try and also the security agencies to ensure that children are protected within these contexts and are not abused. And in such cases that we ensure that action is taken against the individuals, whether in public, whether members of the public, or whether security agencies, so that accountability could be upheld. You will realize again that some of these issues are tied to the lack of resources within the area and within these areas, and you realize that it's a systemic problem and requires a multi-pronged approach and also a lot of education of the community so as to uproot this problem. It will take a long time over the years so as to ensure that the public are made aware of their rights, and not only that, what steps can they do, and what other social, economic measures can be placed within these societies so as to move people away from the constant conflict because of resources. That's thank you I thank you again for the questions that were asked.
Okay, thank you for that. I think Her Excellency Ms. Jackie Kibosia could answer the question that was addressed to the judiciary. Could she kindly just raise her hand? So, yes. Okay.
The question was about the gross crimes. Unfortunately, we don't have youth prisons. So what we have is Boston institutions, and it's a short-term institution. It doesn't do much because it's you would put in a 17-year-old. They finish their term. By the time they are turning 18, there is no place to transition them to. So the greatest challenge is they're called the young person prisons. We don't have them. So you'd have, the case I handled was manslaughter. And what I would do was just do a Boston. Victim also needs to feel that they got justice by way of this offender being gotten rid of from the society. It's a big challenge. And we also have YCTC, the Youth Correctional Center, where they only serve 4 months. And my question has always been, what can you do in 4 months? Before you do the short, sharp, 4 months are already over, you know? So there's a big gap. But again, I want to mention, being somebody who practices a lot of child therapy, is we also look at the psychosocial needs. There's something called adverse childhood experiences. A child will not just wake up in the morning, take a knife and kill someone. There must be something in their past. They must be projecting something. And that is why when I told you we open a PNC file, we do it to prevent future crimes. Majority of the children who have committed serious crimes were once victims. That is, many studies have shown that these children would project later on in late childhood some of the issues that they went through. I have a case I handled last year, and it was a case of defilement, multiple defilements. And when this boy was mitigating, I just asked them a question. I asked them, why did you do it? And they said, because it was done to me. So I had to get even. So you see now why we need psychosocial support early to avoid the projection. So maybe from this conference, some of the recommendations would be that we have something called a youth prison that can graduate the over 18s, and also for serious crimes, so that we can hold them to fully rehabilitate. I hope I've answered your question. Yeah, at times we struggle with it. We struggle with it a lot because then we have nowhere to place them. The maximum is 4 months or 3 years, and what can 3 years do? Very little. So yes, there needs to be a lot of reforms, and I'm glad probation and prisons are here. Maybe they need to put their heads together to see what can be done about it.
Can I just add on to what Honorable Kibosia is saying? It is really a paradox. Something, what we do, what probation officers and children officers do. Sometimes it's not the offense. You might get a child who has committed that manslaughter, but you find that they have undergone those, maybe the person was violent. So the tool that we run on this child, it's a standardized assessment tool, which has questions we ask on the child. Things like even the child's attitude and feelings towards what they have done, peer association, family history. We look at about 10 things. Then at the bottom there, we score it. And when we score down there, it tells us whether this child, in spite of the offense, is a low risk child, medium risk, or high risk. And that helps us to decide if it is institutionalization as an option or probation as an option. And we prefer probation because when the child is rehabilitated within the community, they access more resources. The case management goes better. But if the solution is institution, and mostly it's because of peer, like for example, peer association scores very high. So if they are rehabilitated within the institution, their risk will go higher. Or the community attitude, even though it was manslaughter and they were living in a violent home environment, and maybe the mother was being beaten, this boy comes, the father was drunk, this boy comes and gives the mother, pushes the father, and he falls down and dies. You see, when you do the assessment, you realize the offense looks very serious, but the child is a low risk. You might get one msokoto ya bangi. That's the offense. You run the assessment tool, you find this child is very high risk. They belong to a radicalized group. They are a serious and violent offender, like you are saying. They have no sense of remorse at all. They say, kama gava itupati jobs, ina expect tufanye nini sisi mavijana. So you can see the attitude. So the child is very, and then you find they have other previous convictions. Maybe they were even in an institution before. So this assessment helps us to know. Most institutions, we consider them places for high risk children. Then we have probation hostels, low risk, low and medium risk, and it's the same for some rehabilitation schools. I don't want to speak for Anne, she's there, but even DCS as a department has classified the institution. So that's what we look at. And I do agree with the question that for sure we do have some very serious juvenile offenders, and that's how we classify them.
Okay, thank you for your remarks. Next, I would like to welcome Honorable Lady Justice Madheka to speak on the issue.
Thank you very much, moderator. I just wanted to add my voice to this and to just say that I can tell you that the judicial system gets frustrated when we have serious child offenders. Of course, the Children Act is clear. If you go to section 4, I think subsection 4, it talks about how we are supposed to ensure when you are dealing with criminal cases with children, that you look at the correction of the child and also the interest of the public. So we are required to balance those. But when it comes to punishments or what to do or the corrective measures, we are limited to the ones that are section 190, if I'm not wrong. And mostly it's orders to commit to the institution, supervision and things like that. But recently, and I think there are 2 or 3 authorities, I think Madam Florence will confirm because they are the beneficiaries of those children or those orders. I think one judge dealt with a murder case where this young man just killed his, I think, cousins or something, and he didn't have a reason. According to the judge, it was so bad, he had to give that boy a committal order to the Boston institution, and upon completion of the time in the Boston to proceed to prison. I think Florence, you can share that Madam Florence can share that. And I think there's a girl, I'm not sure where those orders are. And for me, it is an expression of the frustration on what to do with children who commit serious offenses. I agree with Florence, that with the other Florence Mweni, that for children, even the law recognizes the things they do. We are required to start from the environment, because in most communities, including mine, they say you can bend a branch when it is still, still green, but if it gets dry, it will break. But if it's green, you can mold it, you can turn it, you can do whatever. The same thing with children. They are malleable, you can change them. I'm not sure about having a criminal gene. I think that would be very prejudicial if we were to start thinking about people who appear before us as having a criminal gene, because it's expected that they are innocent until we prove them guilty of the offense they have committed and deal with what has happened. But all I wanted to say is, I think it's time we started looking at child offenders in the right way, all of us as a system, to see if we can find ways of trying to change them before they get to do serious crime. And when they commit serious crime, we also find a way of finding the problem, why they did it, so that we can resolve it. I don't know why I don't think just locking up people without mechanisms to deal with the problem is a solution. I don't know. There must be something they do behind the bars, because at the end of the day, they'll come out. So if we don't change them, what happens? So we bring in the psychology staff and also find a way, I agree with Madam Kibosia, a place where the older children from 16 years and above who commit serious crime can also be held where necessary. But right now, we don't have that. But balancing, we do, only that the law again limits us, except now for this precedent that we have, where someone goes to Boston, when they turn 18, they proceed to prison. I don't know what you think about that, but that's now what has happened. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Active audience. Yeah. Sorry about that. Yes, so I do agree with a lot of that has been said by our panelists, and I think that their insights have been very helpful. Could we please give them a round of applause as they go and take their seats? Okay, so now I will hand over to Elvis Cosmos, who is the president of the Strathmore Law Clinic, one of the organizers of this event, to just wrap up and just to give us a brief and concise view of the entire event up until today.
All protocol observed. Good evening. My name is Elvis Cosmos, and I am a fourth-year student of law at Strathmore University. I also have the honor of serving as the president of the Strathmore Law Clinic. Allow me to begin by sharing a quote from Harper Lee in his book, To Kill a Mockingbird. It says, and I quote, "You can never understand a person until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." Now, I will provide this wrap-up from the perspective of a student. So, walking on the streets of Nairobi and, overhearing probably or eavesdropping into a conversation of, a bunch of people walking together, you'll definitely realize that, within our society, there are problems. That's no doubt, The typical cliche scenario is Africans in the diaspora, clanging up together and saying, "Oh my God, my country has more problems than you," and it becomes an Olympics of whose country has more problems than the other. But, ideally away from that, again, now walking into the skin of, the people that are actually, that whose conversation we've actually is dropped into, you'll hear the cliche Serikalis idea come out of that whole conversation in a summation of it all. And when you bother yourself to be bold enough to reach out to the people and say, "Oh, by the way, mimi ni wakili," just introducing yourself as a lawyer, the first question that will come back to you is, what solutions does the law actually have to help me and, my situation as is? Now, narrowing down all of these to our focus on the thematic areas that have been provided for us during this entire summit for day one, it's evident that we can answer the question of what laws are there that can actually help this ordinary man. But now the question that I beg to pose to all of us as students and practitioners is citing the law more than enough to actually help them? Now, From the first day of this summit, I would like to conclude the wrap up with 5 important points. One, these wrap up points are points that we as students have taken out of this entire summit, and I hope it's a representation of what you as students as well have gotten out of it. One being that it's important to develop a purposive approach in the manner in which we actually interpret our laws. Purposive in terms of understanding that laws are aligned, of understanding whom the laws are aligned towards, and this does not actually exclude children from it. Second, posterity cannot be discussed without the mention of the child. It therefore goes without saying that the child is instrumental when we actually attempt to envision a future that actually is composed of harmonious living and unity in society. Third, as we eventually become practitioners, we need to extend a touch of humanity to the children that we shall actually have interactions with in practice, and for the practitioners while they're in practice as now. So one of the last wrap-up points that I would say is that before we actually begin to judge individuals based on, the bandwagon effect of, the societal stereotypes that have been discussed today by majority of the panelists, we need to understand the facts behind the scenes. So we attending this summit is a step forward towards actually saying that we choose not to actually go along with the stereotypes that are actually being shared along in society. We choose to go further as future practitioners to understand the facts behind the scenarios that are actually being presented before us. Lastly, I know that when we think of transformation, it's a huge concept, especially when we put ourselves back to the shoes of being students. But allow me to actually submit to us that transformation, as we have heard from almost all the panelists, does not begins with the one child that we have impact on, and not necessarily all of them at a go, because that one child will impact generations to come. And therefore, in conclusion, dear future colleagues, let us become intentional about climbing in the skin of the child and walk around in it as we influence policy and laws on children's matters in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Elvis. I just want to make a few more announcements. First is that everybody is being asked to report here at 7:45 a.m. tomorrow. So you'll be expected to register during that point, and just please be here by 7:45. Secondly, there is an optional university tour being led by Dr. Jane Wadhuta and Christine Jane after the session. For anyone who would like to go see the university and just look at all the facilities, I just want to remind everybody to hand in their questions for the third panel tomorrow, as instructed by Dr. Jennifer Gitahi. So this is just a reminder to write your questions on a sheet of paper and give them to Thomas Joseph. So yes, next I would like to welcome, for a bit of entertainment, Michelle Oguya to just play a little violin for us. Let's give her a round of applause.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. It's been a wonderful day, hasn't it? Have you guys all learned a lot? Awesome. So, in line with the theme for today, which is child justice, I thought a fitting piece to play would be My Way by Frank Sinatra. Does anyone know it? My Way by Frank Sinatra. Anyone? Oh, awesome. That's great. And for those of you who don't actually know the piece, My Way by Frank Sinatra is a piece that tells, I should probably put this back on, yes, that talks about going through life and fulfilling every expectation and going to the highest of the heights that you can. And this initiative and many others, which I'm sure will be birthed by the people here, will hopefully encourage more children to do the same. So I hope you enjoy. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think she can get another round of applause. Yes, we have had some very talented individuals today and some very groundbreaking thoughts that have been shared with us. So I just want to remind everybody about the few announcements that I had made before we wrap up and you guys are free to mingle and network. So just to kindly remember that tomorrow that we expect you to report here at 7:45 a.m. Remember that there is an optional university tour led by Dr. Jane Wadhuta and Miss Christine Jane. And then kindly, please give in your questions for the third panel tomorrow. For those online, you can give them through the chat. For those in person, you can just write them on a paper to just best allow our moderators and our panelists to prepare. Yes, and I would just like to thank everybody for coming today. It's been a very successful event and all of us here have had a wonderful time and a lot of insights have been shared with us. I hope to see you all tomorrow as we continue this event. And thank you for everything. As for being a wonderful audience, and a special gratitude goes out to our panelists who have availed their time today to sort of speak to us and to tell us things that we may have been aware of and we may not have, because we do really have to recognize that how important these summits are in terms of broadening our views and raising our awareness on certain issues. So I'd just like to close the event for today by thanking everybody here for in attendance and also thanking our organizers for putting together this wonderful event. And I would like to see you all tomorrow. You are all now free to network and mingle.
Recording stopped.